Hi everybody, this is the Cricket Badger podcast.
Each badger marks the track with its own scent.
His black legs are short but very powerful for digging. The name badger probably comes from the French word bêcher, meaning digger.
Welcome back, I'm James Buttler, the Cricket Badger. This is part 2 of a chat about the financial state of the game. In part 1, we looked at the 100 and the ramifications of that, where the counties are getting their money, and we started to scratch the surface of the private equity investment into cricket. So if you haven't watched that already, that's the best way to start. Look at part 1 first, and then join us for part 2, which is coming next, where we're going to delve further into the private equity investment into cricket. Who is that going to benefit? Are there going to be some negative repercussions? Is it going to increase the divide domestically in England in the game? And does it affect the financial sustainability of some parts of cricket? Is it going to make cricket fantastic? Is everybody going to be in clover? We'll find out from Robbie Millar and Neil Virani as we go through this second part. And after we've looked at the private equity investment, we then go on to discuss the world game and the sustainability of Test cricket in particular. Some of the smaller countries really struggling to pay the bills. Can the ICC get something a little bit more equitable in terms of the spread of the finances around the game to encourage the likes of West Indies to travel without having to do it off their own back and not get paid anything for it? So an interesting chat ahead with Robbie and Neil. Hope you enjoy it.
It's that Badger style.
So going back to the private equity deal. So let's call it £500 million because it's easy to be for round numbers. So what happens with that £500 million? Well, 10% of it, so £50 million, is ring fenced to be spent by the ECB on developing grassroots cricket. Again, that is a hell of a lot of revenue that they can spend on grassroots cricket, which is a good thing to increase participation. And so that remaining 450 million is to be split between the 18 counties and the Marylebone Cricket Club, and also, the minor counties as well. So you think, God, 450 million is a hell of a lot. Then that's sliced a lot of ways. So just by a bit of kind of basic math, but a bit, we're talking around 20 million per pie, per slice. And so if we say each county cricket club gets £20 million of revenue just given to them, and then that's their kind of return from that private equity deal. So I think if you're a Kent or you're a Derbyshire, if you're a non-100 hosting county, you look at that, you're getting £20 million just given to you. Ultimately, that is a very simplistic way of giving it.
When you said if you're a Kent, I was going to say, what did you just call me? Anyway, it's a one-off payment, though, isn't it? So say we're using this round figure of 20 million. You give me 20 million, and you give Neil 20 million. Neil goes off and he womanizes. He spends his money in dirty houses of ill repute and stuff, and he's back a year later saying I'm skint. Whereas I'm obviously far more respectable than Neil, and I've still got 20 million plus my interest in the bank in a year's time. Obviously, Neil CCC would be incredibly irresponsible and would probably go out of business, and probably everyone would say, well, so they should, because they've been absolutely irresponsible with that. But there are degrees, there are shades of grey in the middle of that, where some counties will try and tart the ground up. They'll try and maybe add a few seats. They'll try and pay off a bit of debt. And then there's probably not going to be that much left, is there? Maybe.
Well, this is the point, really.
And you notice, Robbie, Neil didn't defend himself against the
Yeah, I think you'd spend it very wisely. I think I think this is the point of it. It is a generational amount of money. So to a Kent, to a Derbyshire, maybe look at even Sussex, that's around 4 to 3 times their annual revenue that they're just getting given to them. For a Surrey, for a Yorkshire, it's around just a little more than a year's worth of annual revenue. For a Surrey, depending on what international match they're hosting, it's around kind of just 8 months worth of annual revenue. So there's different stages here, and I think kind of what the ECB's top brass are looking at this. It is a generational amount of money to give to our county cricket clubs in one payment, and that is why, if this does go through, and I think it will, it goes through, the money that they're given, it has to be very stringent on what they spend it on. So you have to spend it on infrastructure, on assets that can generate you revenue going forward. And what could that look like? And I think that it's absolutely clear from our research that county cricket clubs, that they don't generate enough money from cricket hosting activities to be sustainable businesses. So it's okay, can you, to spend a portion of this money to maybe upgrade your facilities, to make yourself more attractive, to generate what I call revenue maximization. So generate the most amount of revenue you can possibly from your cricket hosting activities. But the growth, and where I think county cricket clubs can become self-sustaining businesses, is them going into new ventures. So we're looking at Leicestershire, their kind of master plan, and a fantastic visionary with their CEO, looking at, okay, what can we do for our community? We're not going to host test matches, we know that, but you know what, we might host the odd women's international match, or we might host a women's international match every year, and potentially we might have a 2020 in ODI. That's the vision, to host a men's international match. But that's a nice to have. But actually, we're going to invest in educational facilities. We're going to have our own university here, or part of a university here. So that's a genuinely profitable revenue stream that year round, and that they manage themselves. We're going to host events here. We're going to host conferences here. We're going to build our brand up that we are a multi-use venue. We've got something. We've got a product to sell, and that's why we're going to become a sustainable business. And that's what Surrey have done. Surrey recognised that 15 years ago, and Surrey are genuinely, off-field performance is exceptional, and they are the case study. That's what the fall. And it might not be hosting events and conferences. It might be whatever kind of the local demand is. But for example, Durham are looking at investing in hotels and build a hotel on site that again can be used as a conference space. It can be used to sell for whatever whoever will pay for it. But there's a genuine need there, and that's what the £20 million must be spent on.
We'll have Ashley Giles on the podcast last week, and potentially you could go into helping them move around and get all of those things at the same time, isn't it? And Neil's unmuted himself. He's either going to defend himself against previous accusations, or he's got a question.
Yeah, I guess there are 2 points. I mean, obviously, the 20 million is a generational lump sum to be coming in, but you'd assume with the ownership going to private investment, then that would also affect the income stream. So you're giving up a recurring income stream for the 20 million. Yeah. But the elephant in the room is, again, between hosting and non-hosting, because out of nowhere, considering the ownership of the 100 and the franchises was supposed to be ECB on behalf of all counties equally. Yeah. The host nations, if we take your figures for an example, if we're getting in 500 mil, that's a 500 mil asset on the other side, which has just been gifted to 8 counties, who therefore are getting a £62.5 million asset each, as well as the 20 million share. Now, I know the purported figures had a share amount and then a non-host amount as well, but it is effectively equal amounts which they're partaking in, as well as getting a £62.5 million asset to do with as they will. So it's just increasing the divide between host and non-host there artificially, and seems to me unnecessarily.
I was going to say, you're completely correct there, Neil. And the elephant in the room, I'm going to throw something else into, actually, that even for the 100 hosting counties, there's going to be there's going to be a two-tiered system, because the £500 million injection that we were just discussing there was for 49% stake. And again, this is the ECB, and again, it's the old Surrey executive team that are in a position at the ECB now. So they're incredibly business driven, and have changed Surrey's financial position in a good way. So they've kind of got the financial sake of the counties at heart here. But the 51% is then, as I say, gifted to the hosting county. So I'll change example. We'll give London. It's the Oval Invincibles. That will be 51% gifted to Surrey County Cricket Club. Then the county cricket clubs are then allowed to sell whatever portion they feel they can sell, all of it if they like, to private equity. That can be new, that can be new investment, that can be to the same investment, if to whoever they sell to initially as part of the ECB deal. That's and attached to that sale. I think 10% of that sale goes back into. It has to be shared between the other counties. I say other counties, the non-100 hosting counties. So it's getting quite complex, isn't it? But this is exactly the point of it. But so let's just say the 51% stake of the Oval Invincibles is sold for £100 million. £10 million then is split between the non-100 hosting counties. So you think, okay, we're getting, they are doing nothing. Sorry, rephrase. They're not doing nothing. They are not it's not impacting their day-to-day businesses, but they're just getting more revenue generated to them, given to them. Then that remaining £90 million is Surrey's to keep. So, and although I hate to say it because I am a proud Northerner, the London and the Southern-based franchises are more valuable than the Northern ones.
Forever you and me, right by my side, where you ought to be. 'Cause if I ever were to lose you, I just don't know what I'd do. Let me hear you now.
I've got two questions coming off that. As you just suggested there with the end of your answer, whatever the Welsh team's called is going to go for a lot less than the Surrey side, isn't it?
Yes,
and therefore that increases the divide even within the 100 teams. And when Colin Graves came back in to take charge of Yorkshire, he's basically, and he wants to make it a non-members club and basically take control of that. And he's obviously got the financial interest in that club. A lot of that money's going to end up in his pocket, isn't it? Is this potentially why he's come back at this time?
I think the short answer is no, it won't, because, and this is, and again, a really...
It's not to make him any poorer, though, is it?
Well, I think we've got to separate slightly the two issues there. I think how Yorkshire County Cricket Club is set up, and again, this is similar to 16 of the 18 county cricket clubs, is they are what we call fan-owned or member-owned. So, I'm a member at Yorkshire. I am technically a shareholder at Yorkshire County Cricket Club. Therefore, we technically govern the club. The Colin Graves can't come along in the current kind of constitution and take 10 million pounds out of the club in dividends. If it became privately owned, they could, because it's his business to run. So I think and this will be very, very important for the private equity deal, is the money going to the county cricket clubs stays within the county cricket clubs. And this is what I mean by stringent, strict parameters that it's spent on. It has to, if this money's coming in, it has to be spent on, from a suite of activities in terms of Is it upgrades to Stadia? Is it upgrades to digital platforms that you can maybe sell items on? Is it in facilities? That's what it needs to be spent on. And it kind of we're giving you £20 million. You then have to provide a business case what you're going to spend it on. Otherwise, we're not going to give you the money.
So, sorry, so if Colin Graves makes it a non-members club, makes it a private business, he will be able to pocket some of the cash coming in.
Yes, as in if it's
because he's never had any intention of doing that, but then of course he has. Anyway, that's another discussion altogether. The other thing with the members club part of it, and we're getting off the financials, is it as you said, it kind of creates those checks and balances. A Robbie Millar doesn't have huge power, but you do have the right to go along and raise your hand at a meeting and stop a particular policy going through, and potentially stop Colin Graves becoming the god of Yorkshire cricket in terms of the finances of it all. So there are massive. I mean, the upshot of everything we've just talked about, Robbie, is there are massive decisions ahead for everybody in cricket, aren't there?
Absolutely, and I think just going back to the fan-owned element of it, that is one of the great institutions of county cricket, or great points of the institutions of county cricket, because these being member owned is unique. It's not something money can buy. It's James, me and you can go to the AGM at Yorkshire and we can hold Colin Graves to account. We can say, if it's a private members club, it's a private organisation, we have no power to do that. If Colin Graves wants to move Yorkshire to a franchise club in India, to become the Yorkshire Super Giants or something like that, then he physically can't do that because we have to vote on that. It goes against the Constitution and the kind of articles of association. The private equity deal does muddy the water there slightly, because what you're doing is it will be a segment of the organisation. So if it goes through, the private equity will not own part of Yorkshire County Cricket Club. They will own the franchise that is a subsidiary of Yorkshire County Cricket Club, but they won't own the County Cricket Club totally. But it's combining two models. We're talking about the North American model there, and beforehand, it complicates things, because who's going to make decisions? Who's more important? Is the franchise more important? Is the County Cricket Club more important? The private equity, and again, this is another really key point on the other side of things, the private equity firm or investors that ultimately will buy the 100, the only thing they are fussed about is revenue and the value that they've. So if they buy for 500 million, they want it to be worth a couple of billion in a couple of years. That is the goal. There's no other goal apart from that. And that,
which problematically for me would mean if there is a decision where they have to choose between a county championship getting a bit of priority and the 100 getting priority, which one they're going to choose? It's going to be the 100 every time, isn't it?
You can already see that happening now. But I think this is the so what, I would say. It's if this goes through, it's a generational amount of money. We can, spend on it how we like. I say we, the county cricket clubs. But then it's what are the added on implications?
Yeah, I hate to break it to you, Robbie. You're not going to get any of this money.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Not Colin Graves, are we? That's the. But I think here could this private equity deal actually start to then devalue England internationals? So actually, does the test match? To be fair, already has. Does the test matches? Again, and it wouldn't happen against Australia and India. But does the test matches become devalued? So we've got 6. Well, we've got 3 internationals against the West Indies in 3 consecutive weeks. Bit of a break. 3 consecutive test matches against Sri Lanka. The England internationals were the main revenue stream in terms of cricket hosting in cricket activities. They might not become that. That's what might change. So the added implications of that, and that's what the counties own. I say the counties own. That's the revenue the counties generate themselves. So if that's taken away from them, that's another added complication. Then they actually might be completely reliant on the 100 and the revenue associated with the 100. And I think that's a really important point to note.
Well, you got two risks there, haven't you? I mean, one is, as you say, the Test summer is now 6 weeks, let's say. Well, 7 weeks from the end of the IPL to the start of the 100. The other financial risk is baseball. If you're only having 2 or 3 day tests so that the boys can have a couple of days of golf, I mean, Lords had to refund 3 days worth of tickets for this last test match, and England haven't gone to day 5 in 80% of the matches they played since Ben and Baz took over. I mean, there's a lot of money being left on the table there.
That Lord's situation, I when I saw the fixtures and I saw Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday at Lords, I was thinking, oh, they've hit the jackpot here, because Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are the huge hospitality days, because that's when everybody wants to take a day out the city or whatever and go and stand there in their suit on the balcony in the sunshine. And then you've got Saturday, which is obviously always a big day. Probably might not get into Sunday, but if you do, you can get a bit of a crowd in on a Sunday as well. It was absolute gold dust. And then obviously it finished very quickly because A, West Indies were poor, and B, England get on with it, like Neil said.
I think it's, again, I think that's one. The county cricket clubs that need to change when they're hosting an international match. They need to think, oh yeah, we might get 4 days worth of revenue. They need to maybe change about actually how they think about that. Actually, it might be, we'll get 3 days of revenue. If we get a 4th, that's a bonus. So I think, but in terms of financial risk, it's what are you losing if it doesn't go to 4 days? All counties are insured against their ticket sales. That's the main driver, if I'm being honest. But kind of food and drink, merchandise, that isn't insignificant. That's in the hundreds of thousands.
Those insurance policies aren't cheap, especially if you're claiming on them every year.
Yeah, no, exactly. So but I think in terms of, I would look at this, and if you're playing India, if you're playing Australia, New Zealand, if you're playing a high quality international outfit, you'd think, well, yes, you might have the odd 3 day test match, but you'd usually go to 4 with a bit of rain in it as well. I think I think it's a bit of a, I haven't got the data, but it's a bit of a fluke when it goes to kind of not full 3 full days kind of thing.
Is there anything you want to add? Is there anything you want to add, Robbie, or can we move it a bit wider afield in terms of the international cricket and get into Neil's discussion of this morning? Because I was only a bystander, really, as you and Lucas were talking about it, but I thought it was an interesting chat about the future of Test cricket, the future of international cricket, the fact the big 3 rule the roost financially, the fact West Indies come cap in hand, and basically, teams touring one of the big nations are making a loss by touring them, which just seems ridiculous at the moment.
Just the last thing I had to add about the domestic county cricket and this private equity deal for the 100, in terms of my heart says it's a bad thing. And, I've grown up loving county cricket. It's, part of our, I'd say, identity. But my business head says it's a good idea. And I think actually it will provide a hell of a lot of revenue for clubs that could, either pay off their debts and become debt free. That's an incredibly good financial position to be in. Or it will give clubs an incredible amount of money to spend on assets, facilities that can future-proof their business going forward. So heart says tough, head says good decision.
That 20 million you're talking about gives Colin the chance to pay himself off and then make money off the back of it. Anyway, let's move on from Colin Gray.
No comment. No.
Neil, the international setup and I don't want to kind of dwell too long on this one, but we need to get some kind of system in world cricket where we are genuinely supporting in the same way we've just been talking about big test match grounds in England and the smaller counties. We've got the big 3 in test cricket, and then we've got other countries who are trying to play test cricket, trying to make their way in the world, trying to bring through world-class stars, trying to keep those world-class stars happy and not have them just disappearing off and playing T20 franchise cricket all the time. We need to get some kind of equitable situation where we support people who are playing test cricket, don't we?
Absolutely. I mean, the situations that we've had recently, Ireland cancelling Test cricket, and I think other tours as well, because they couldn't afford to put them on. The West Indies noting that they had to pay $200 million to tour Australia last year. It can't work like that. The reciprocal arrangement where, we'll make money when you tour us, you can make money when we tour you, doesn't work due to, one, the increased costs because of the growing professionalization of the game, which is a good thing, but also the massive disparity between the rights in different nations. I'll hold my hands up first. I'm an India fan. Obviously, at the moment, we are providing the vast majority of income to the ICC, but also we're taking the biggest share of that pie. Numbers that I saw were that the Indian TV rights that Star have paid the ICC for this latest cycle make up somewhere between 90 and 95% of ICC income. India take out 38.5% of the distributed income after ICC have made their development payments and so on, which is massively above everyone else. But you look at it in those terms, and India are paying 50% of that money to play cricket as well. So I don't want to advocate a situation where India subsidise other countries, because
the other thing that sorry to interrupt. The other thing is there are more people watching cricket. There are more eyeballs in India watching cricket than anywhere else in the world as well, which is why that TV deal's like it is, isn't it? Because if you think there's 60 million people in England or the UK, you got 27 million people in Australia. You got 6 million, 7 million in New Zealand. You add, Pakistan, 250 million, something like that. You add all those together, it comes, it comes nowhere near the population of India.
And with all due respect, in almost every other country apart from, let's say, Pakistan and Bangladesh, and probably Sri Lanka as well, a much lower percentage of the population see cricket as their first sport. Yeah, absolutely. It's a numbers game there, but there must be some stuff that we can do. Oh, the other point that I should make is the ICC's income is from the white ball World Cups. That is how they make their money. So we can't argue that there are too many World Cups and too much T20 and ODI cricket getting in the way of Test cricket, and then ask the ICC to also fund more Test cricket. And when we've also got to remember that there are 3 countries who can remain solvent without ICC distributions. Everyone else is only keeping their head above water because of that money. They require those tournaments, and that's why you get situations like the Guyana semi-final, and India being on at a certain time zone, certain time to hit 8 p.m. in the time zones. It is not about making things easier for the India team. It's about maximizing the Indian TV rights. And that's what runs international cricket, those Indian TV rights.
I was commentating on the cricket the other day, and I found myself saying something I thought sounded really good. I'm going to try and do it again. In terms of, I always think with custodians of the game, I said this to Ashley Giles last week, as the administrator at Worcestershire, anybody that goes into one of those roles where you're in charge of cricket in whatever part of the world, you've got a responsibility to take what you inherit and make it viable, sustainable, and better, if you can, in 50 years, 100 years' time. That's your job. That's your role. It's not to feather your own nest. It's not to make yourself and your ego get bigger. It's to basically look after the game. If those other things come as a result of that, fine. But if you're making the game better, that's your job. So surely, and this would probably have happened 15, 20 years ago, but surely they are doing it to some degree, but then India don't turn up. But everybody should come round the table and actually say, how do you want this game to look in 50 years' time? How do you, as a world? I mean, there's an element of hippie in this, and there is a big element of hippie in me. But if you are, as a global cricket entity, how do you want cricket to look? West Indies want to be sustainable, want to make money, and want to be able to pay their own players. India want the IPL to be as massive as possible, and India to be as successful as possible, and to feed those 1.4 billion and growing set of people. England want to be as big as possible. Australia do. New Zealand wants to carry on punching, but everybody's got their own little kind of needs and desires in this world. But there's got to be some, unless we all get together and actually plan ahead and then work back to see how we're going to get there. How do we not just completely fracture cricket? Because, as I say, everybody wants different things out of this. And there's too many powerful people just looking after themselves at the moment, aren't they?
You just described the Cricket Connects conference at Lord's last week.
Yeah, that's what I said. And India didn't turn up. Yeah,
but that's also about as far from hippie as you can get. That was basically Davos for cricket, without the two most important people there. One, the secretary of the BCCI, two, the CEO of Star Sports.
Yeah.
They're the two people who control the direction of cricket. And in terms of everyone playing cricket, I actually think that England and Australia could take a leaf out of India's book, because India tour more than any other team out there. And the way that they've managed that is by basically, we've got an official A side, which also plays more A-team cricket than everyone else, but we've basically got a second A side, like the T20 squad that's been in Zimbabwe this week. And it's not even just altruistic. It means that we've got an extra 15 players who are getting international standard experience out there. And England and Australia have been very, very bad partners to the smaller nations. Afghanistan have never played in England, even before England and Australia joined the US in ushering the Taliban back in. Ireland get a game every 5 years. Bangladesh haven't been to Lord's since Tamim struck a couple of centuries 15 years ago. And then we complain when we invite over the West Indies, when we invite over Sri Lanka. Less said about Australia's commitment to the small nations, the better. But
they always cancel about 2 weeks before they're supposed to be flying, don't they?
Yeah, I mean that in terms of getting cricket into these nations, so that you haven't got a team turning up where 3 players had double figures in Test appearances at Lord's this week. So actually, go out and play them, and if not the main squad, I'm not expecting Ben Stokes to be playing every single week of the year. You can use it as a chance to blood new players, and you won't end up where you've got so many bowlers coming to the end of their careers at the same time.
We need a solution before we finish today. We're not going to get one, are we? But we need to try and think of something. Is some kind of taxable system a possible? So if you're a really small nation, you're not earning above the threshold. I'm thinking income tax here. You don't pay tax. You only kind of maybe get some handouts given to you. If you are India or England and Australia, and you're earning above, then maybe a certain percentage of that income over that threshold goes into a pot to help other people play Test cricket, something along those lines, where we actually help people out a little bit rather than just keep it all for ourselves.
I'd prefer to reward them for the work that they're doing. Yeah. So what Johnny Graves said about some sort of fee for touring teams. So play the less wealthy nations more, and when they come over, say 5% of the rights goes to the touring team. So if they come out, fulfill a Test tour in India, BCCI is making an absolute shed load of Star Sports. 5% of that will go to West Indies or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or whoever, and that could possibly fund them for it'll cover their their expenses for maybe a couple of years.
You shouldn't be losing money touring a country, should you?
No, well, I mean, they don't earn anything, do they?
No.
At all. They've got to be paid. Football analogies actually work quite well here. You get an away allocation of tickets when you play somewhere else. What we don't want, what we're not going to get away from is our La Liga approach to TV rights, where Real and Barca organise their own stuff. The disparity is too big to centralise that. As much as I'd love the WTC TV rights to be sold by the ICC and then distributed equitably, there's too big a gap there. But a team should be making money when they play. So if they're touring you, pay them that percentage of the rights. You may get pittance when you go and visit the West Indies, but it's a gesture in the right direction, and it's also teams earning that money rather than it being a subsidy, which comes with the power differential that is going to play out in the ICC politics as well.
That's a football analogy I like, because I mean I was thinking actually when Robbie was talking earlier about a 20 million handout of a cut of the revenue of the private equity deal. That's like 4 weeks, probably less than 4 weeks' wages for a Ronaldo or something, isn't it? Which that just puts into perspective the difference between a complete sport and one player in football in terms of levels of income. And Robbie, I invite you into my wigwam. We're going to sit down, peace and love out, everybody. Let's make the world a better place. How do we solve these inequities in world cricket?
I was going to say, I think everything that Neil suggested is spot on, and I think also it's. I was going to say, I think apologies, Neil, you might roll your eyes here, but the worst thing to happen to the financial health of world cricket is the BCCI. But what I would say is, only because of disparity in terms of, say, the ICC, the distribution of the revenue on the similar to how the ECB do it, the ICC to have the same mechanism to provide revenue to each of their member nations, the ECB, BCCI, etc., etc. When you start to change the proportion that you're distributing, you are changing the face of the game, because they're in the same competition. They play the same matches, but each team is given more money depending on who they are. And I think we need to look at ourselves even in English and Australian cricket. It's not just a BCCI problem, because we didn't kick up a fuss when we were part of the big three and we all got more than everyone else. We've only started doing it now. The BCCI get an incredible amount more than we do. Your Sri Lankas, your West Indies, your South Africas, they can think, well, where were you 10 years ago when this started happening? So no one is not guilty here. But I think the solution is similar to what Neil says. I think you tour, you get 10 to 15% or 20%, but it's a fixed fee, as in the ICC organise it. It can't be negotiated on a power structure. It's, listen, the touring team get 20% of the broadcast deal. That's it. And so that's a portion of it. And again, I think we even future broadcast and future commercial deals, if it's part of a competition that everyone plays, everyone gets the same slice of the pie. So, okay, if it's an Indian broadcaster, okay, we can maybe negotiate that separately. But I think if it's a broadcaster, if it's a commercial sponsorship to the next 3 World Cups, that is split evenly across the board, and that will provide these guys, when I say the boards of the countries, with more revenue, and that's all they want. All they want is to be competitive. They want revenue to be financially sustainable and also be competitive when they're playing. Because what do we want in 10 years' time? Do we just want a World Cricket League of England, Australia, and India? Absolutely not. We don't. We want the Pakistans of this world. We want the West Indies. We want the South Africas. We want the New Zealand. More competition, the better, because it gives us a better product to sell.
Totally agree. Absolutely, totally agree. And hopefully they come to my wigwam and we can thrash it all out. And India turn up as well, and the director of Sky Sports and everything like that. I keep getting told by Indian fans that get back in your box, England person, because we now rule the roost. And there does seem to be, and I don't want to kind of end this with kind of too political, but there does seem to be, Neil, a totally justified kind of resentment to the colonial years. England's ruled cricket, Australia ruled cricket, you ruled us as well, and now it's our turn to rule cricket and kind of almost kind of put you down there, which is, I totally understand that sentiment, but it's not going to be very good for cricket, is it?
No. I come at this with someone who, say, Schadenfreude, but sort of recognises 100 years of mismanagement of world cricket by England. Be it denying people the opportunity to play Test cricket because they weren't Commonwealth, or their skin was too dark, or they lacked a penis. Then we should be learning from those mistakes. Every person who comes along later should be learning and standing on the shoulders of giants, really. Definitely. Just because things have been done badly before does not mean that we should be repeating those errors. So something does need to change in how the game is run, and as you say, it's about all nations being better partners to each other. Not just looking after themselves, and not just looking after the few people who historically have been there. I always say we want to grow the game. I wonder how much cricket actually does want to grow, because cricket, from the very first times it became more professional, has been more about excluding people, and it has been a status symbol, and it has been elitist from the 1800s onwards. And that would be the biggest change, if we can change cricket's outlook to new people wanting to join in, and because it's too good a game to lose to our own stupidity.
Absolutely, totally and utterly agree with everything you just said there. And I think from that point of view, the inclusivity and expanding the game point of view, it's important that we work together as a global cricket community. But also, the reason I would like to have that wigwam chat now, for want of a better phrase, is because there is potential for America to grow, and that's going to take up loads of weeks of the calendar. There's potential for the UAE and other parts of the Saudi Arabia to have their cricket leagues, which are again going to take up weeks. There's only 52 weeks, 365 days in a year. We can't have we're going to end up with cricket at war almost if we have everybody who we want to get involved in cricket actually getting exactly what they want out of it. So there needs to be some kind of balance, doesn't there, along the way, where we do grow the game, we get people in, and we see more countries taking on, but we also have that kind of level playing fields where we work together to make cricket a fantastic place to be. I think we've probably got through a lot there. That might have to go out over 2 episodes, I think, chaps. Neil, Virani, as always, it's a pleasure to have you on the Cricket Magic podcast. Hopefully we'll see you soon again, mate. And
cheers,
Robbie
James.
Miller, star guest today. Thank you very much indeed. From Sheffield Hallam University. You've been really good answering all the questions, and we've kind of between us, I think, cobbled together some kind of understanding of what we've got ahead of ourselves in terms of cricket. But thanks, Robbie. It's been really good to have you on.
No, but thanks so much for having me, James. It's lovely to meet you too, Neil. And I think it's having the conversation is a good thing. And I think because it's going to be some fantastic. Well, I'll say fantastic. There's a lot of decisions to be made, and this horse is going to run.
So thank you to Neil and to Robbie. Thanks to manscaped.com for their continued support of the Cricket Badger podcast. And we will see you again soon. Cheers, everybody.